Hey, it's Jamila, and today I am sharing with you my favorite pregnancy and childbirth books. Whether you are just thinking about having a baby, trying to have a baby, or just found out you're pregnant, congratulations, by the way, you definitely don't want to delay in taking in as much information as possible about the pregnancy and childbirth and breastfeeding realm of information. Many women will take a childbirth class at the hospital, which basically all the hospital is going to do is teach you how to go along with their protocols or what they're going to do to you once you come there to have your baby. Or some women just show up and expect their doctor to just take them through the whole process. And because there's so much unknown around actually giving birth specifically naturally, there's a lot of fear. And so women show up to the hospital thinking, hey, I'm just going to get an epidural or whatever. And when things start happening and there's a cascading of interventions, sometimes they end up with an unwanted C-section. And that's fine. I had to have 2 C-sections, but that was because I had previous uterine surgery. And so it was unsafe for me to actually labor naturally. Now, what's funny though is I didn't find that out until I was pregnant with my first son. I was at my 18-week appointment, and hey, I'm thinking scar tissue, whatever. And my doctor's like, no, I actually can't do it. I had multiple fibroids that were removed 4 years prior, and so I'm thinking, what's the big deal? And he's like, no, because the uterus, when it's in labor, it's contracting, and each one of those scars is weak, and it could potentially rupture. So I was devastated and had to go through a grieving process, which I'll get into that a little bit later. But the reason why I'm making this video is because I'm very passionate or emphatic about this issue and this subject. And even when it comes to breastfeeding, I am completely and totally unreasonable. I am pro breastfeeding and breast milk and human milk, and so far against specifically preterm formula usage in the NICU, because it was the causation in the death of my son that I cannot even put into words how much I am against it. So if your position is different, that's fine, and perhaps this is not the video for you, but my position has a period at the end of the sentence. And so that's where I'm coming from. And so this information that I'm going to be sharing with you, these books, I got them on Amazon, but I'm going to be sharing them with you and why I think they're so important for you to read if you're thinking about having a baby, trying to have a baby, or currently pregnant with a baby, because information is power and knowledge is key to you being able to protect your child from any sort of unwanted interventions and to really be a knowledgeable and intelligent patient, because really the more information you have, the easier you make it for your doctor to treat you if they're a good doctor. Some doctors allow their ego to get in the way of them actually treating their patients, and that's not a good doctor. A good doctor is typically impressed when you've done your research, because you're making their job easier. Now they don't have to do so much trial and error because you've already done all the homework, and they're like, okay, well, we can just go from there. So let's get right into it after that super long drawn out intro, right? So the first book I highly, highly, highly recommend is Husband Coached Childbirth by Robert Bradley. This is the book that is behind the Bradley method of natural childbirth. If you're going to take a childbirth education class, I highly recommend you take a Bradley natural childbirth class. It is the absolute best 12 weeks of an investment in education that you're going to put into your child, because that's really what it's all about, because it teaches you how birth is supposed to happen, right? All things being equal and perfect, right? And the reason why that's so important is because that way, if something should go wrong or off kilter, you know why, or what could be the reason, or what you will and you won't accept, or what you are and aren't okay with, because you know what this and that will do. So again, once you understand how something is supposed to be, then you're in a position of, again, power to take charge of your childbirth and not just show up and expect other people to do something that really truly is your experience. They are simply there to assist you in birthing that child into this world. So I recommend reading this. I actually read this twice. Once before I was pregnant and then after I got pregnant. This book is so good. It's a very easy read. It's like really like he's having a conversation with you, but it was very eye-opening because he was a doctor, you know, that delivered babies back in the days of when fathers were not allowed in the hospital. And so, anywho, but this I highly recommend. And I'll put links to all of these books, you know, where you can find them on Amazon. The next book that I recommend is, and I actually read this too. I started reading it before I got pregnant, and then I finished afterwards. And it is by La Leche League International, The Womanly Art of Breastfeeding. And it really is like a manual, you know what I'm saying? But I actually read it cover to cover because I wanted to know all that there is to know about breastfeeding. I'm like, okay, I want to breastfeed my child, but what does that entail? What is that about? What I like about this book is La Leche League was started by mothers, breastfeeding mothers. And so it's from the perspective of women who have actually breastfed. It's not just a whole bunch of, you know, medical mumbo jumbo, but actually real issues that can come up, real solutions. It even talks about the La Leche League meetings because you can actually go to a La Leche League meeting. They're like free groups of breastfeeding moms, and you can get your questions answered. Even if you're pregnant, you can go, and there's information about it in the book, you know, the website and whatnot. But I highly recommend this because if you don't know anything about breastfeeding other than that, yeah, the boob goes in the baby's mouth, this is your breastfeeding Bible. And should you encounter any issues after you give birth, it's an excellent reference. So I highly recommend that you read that as well. The next book that I recommend that you read is Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. Now, this book was really good. I read this one when I got pregnant because I had read those two books. I read the Bradley book twice. And I'm like, okay, I need a new book to read. And you know how you just get on YouTube and you get to going around reading this and that, and the next thing you know, you done fell upon something and you're like, oh, what's this? And so I learned about a woman named Ina May Gaskin. And she's almost like America's midwife. You know, she's been around forever, since like the hippie days or whatever. And she is just an excellent resource on natural childbirth outside of the hospital and in the hospital. And what I recommend when it comes to this book is that there is a back half. The first part of the book is filled with birth experiences, and the latter half of the book is filled with information on like medications and things you can expect at the hospital when you go to give birth. So the way that I actually recommend reading this book is starting at the back so that you can get an explanation on all these different medical procedures and medications and things that are used in birth, and kind of get an understanding of that, and then go back and read the birth stories at the front of the book. Because for me, I don't know, when you just jump right in there, first of all, you're like, okay, well, what am I reading? You know, oh, okay, we're talking about all these birth stories. But I don't know, I just feel like I'm a person who likes to get to the point very quickly. I'm not like, as I'm rambling on this video, right? But I'm a person who likes to, what's up? What's the answer? You need to get to the point real quick. And so the back of the book is to get to the point real quick. And then the front is like, okay, the good, emotional, positive birth stories that help you to, you know, appreciate the beauty of natural childbirth and having, you know, the proper mindset around it, and really, you know, it's just good. It's a good read. But like I said, start at the back and then read the front. Okay? Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. And she's good to Google, or not Google, yeah, you can Google her, but search her on YouTube too, and you'll find lots of videos on her as well. Now, as I mentioned, with the birth of my first son, I was going along thinking, okay, I'm going to have this. I wanted a natural, all natural home water birth. If I could have had my dream come true, that's how I would have had my son. But then I found out, you know, like how much a home birth is, and it's not that expensive, but when you have insurance and you don't have to pay like $2-3 grand out of pocket, or $4 grand, whatever, you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to have a baby in the hospital. But believe it or not, my doctor did water births in the hospital. Only doctor in my city that does that. But like I said, I found out that I couldn't have a vaginal birth. I was going to have a C-section because of previous uterine surgery. So I was extremely disappointed. And I ended up just searching, and I found this book. And it's called The Essential C-Section Guide. And I also recommend you read this book, even if you are not planning on having a C-section, like you don't have any issues that might make you think that that could be a possibility. Because what this book is really good at is, because you have an idea in your mind of how you want your child to be born and come into the world. Okay, you fantasize about that, you've got it in your mind, and like for me, it was that natural birth. And when to find out it wasn't going to be that, it was really, I had to grieve it. It was like a loss of the birth that I wanted. I felt like my son was getting shortchanged. You know, we weren't going to get to do skin to skin. I just felt like it was just, the whole thing was just being jacked up, and I had to grieve it. And this book is really written from the perspective of the woman who maybe is having an unexpected C-section, or didn't know she was going to have one, or maybe finds out she has to have one and just wasn't planning on it. And so it's really good about being sensitive to those emotional issues. And I like it too because it even respects the principles of the Bradley method. It respects the principles of natural childbirth, even though it's talking about having a C-section. So it's good to be prepared just in case, because anything could happen. And so I recommend it, and this is an easy read, as you can see, it's not very long, and it's a good read too. I recommend reading this as well because you want to, again, just be educated so that if it unfortunately has to happen, you're prepared for it mentally and emotionally. I guess the good thing about my situation is I found out at 18 weeks, so I had a long time to get over it and accept it versus having pushed for 20 hours and then finding out that now after I'm exhausted, I have to have major surgery. So I am grateful for at least that, because for some women, that's how, their C-section experience goes. Now, the last book is not so much a book that I recommend reading from cover to cover, but it's just a reference, a really good book to have. When you're pregnant, it's good to have a reference of things that, when something comes up and you're just not sure, it kind of tells you, you can look up different conditions you may feel, symptoms and things when you're pregnant. And also it gives you like, every week, it kind of explains what's going on in your body and with the development of your baby. And I found that to be very exciting because I love that, because it's like you're growing a human and you want to know, well, this week, what are we growing? We're growing some toes, or whatever. So yeah, so I do recommend this book. Now, I was not interested in any of the what to expect when you're expecting, because for me, I'm not going to read no book on no whole bunch of symptoms and then all of a sudden I have all of them. Because the power of suggestion is it can happen. You didn't read about it, now you have it. So I'm like, I don't want to read about any of that, because whatever, if something comes up, then I'll look it up. But I'm not going to sit here and read a book that's going to talk to me about all these things that may never happen, because the reality is pregnancy is so individual and different. You really can't compare. It's like apples and oranges between two women. I'll say this though, the closest person, if you want to know anything about what your pregnancy and birth experience may be like, the closest person would be your mother. More than likely how her pregnancies went will be more than likely how your pregnancies go. That's kind of how I found mine to be. My mother didn't have morning sickness, neither did I. So I didn't have hard pregnancies. The first one I had a lot of fatigue, which was like, whoa, what is that? And then the second one, all I had was, I had a complete placenta previa. And so I just kind of put myself on bed rest. So that was the only challenge there, really, is just not being able to be as physically active as, I want it to be. And so anywho, these are my recommendations. Just to review, the Mayo Clinic book, Guide to a Healthy Pregnancy, as a reference, not for you to necessarily read cover to cover, but these are the books that you should read cover to cover. Number one, Husband Coach Childbirth by Dr. Bradley. Absolutely. If you don't read anything else, read this. and this, The Womanly Art of Breastfeeding. Again, if you only have time to read 2 books, read these 2. And have your husband needs to read this book too. Okay? You know, men are so bad about reading pregnancy books. Okay? Tell your husband to read this book. Put it in the bathroom, wherever, so he'll read it. Okay? So, and like I said, Womanly Art of Breastfeeding. If you're only going to read 2, read those 2. But I recommend you read them all. The next one is Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. Remember, start at the back and then go back and read the beginning, all of the birth stories, okay? And then lastly is the Essential C-Section Guide, because you just want to be prepared in the event that the unexpected happens. Now, in another video I have here on my YouTube channel, I talk about the loss of my first son, and the book that I'm reading in there is called Preemies. Now, do I recommend that you get that book as well? Absolutely. Why? Because premature birth is something that you usually don't see coming. And if you show up at the NICU and have no idea, you know, because most women that end up in the NICU is like, you don't even know what happened, you know, and then you don't know what they're doing to your child and you're worried about them. So anyway, you absolutely need to educate yourself on the NICU and premature birth, because that is something that we were not prepared for. And so we were unaware of some of the protocols and standard operating procedures that can actually be hazardous to your healthy baby. And as a result, we lost our son. So, you know, our second son, as I mentioned, I had a complete placenta previa, was premature as well, but his experience was completely different because we knew what to expect. The hospital was very good about working with us on our requests and requirements, and we had a completely different outcome. And he actually came home before his due date. So that just lets you know the power of advocacy, the power of information, and the power of breast milk. Okay, so those are the books. If you have any questions about anything that I've mentioned here, feel free to share it in the comments below. If you have anything more of a private nature, feel free to DM me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you might have on pregnancy, on childbirth, on the NICU. I've said it in another video that at some point I am going to do a video on how to prepare, or just things to be aware of just in case you end up in the NICU. But like I said, it's such, ask any mother that's had a baby in the NICU, and I went through it twice. And like I said, and then lost my first son. It's such an emotionally draining experience that it takes a certain amount of effort to revisit it. And so I just have to get up the mental energy to bring it all up and bring it out and give it and share it to you, which I will, because I wish I had known certain things when my son was born prematurely, my first son. And so that's the information I'm going to be sharing, is what I wish I would have known, that I'm going to tell you, good, bad, ugly, or indifferent, but you're going to know. So when you show up, that's not going to be your outcome with your baby, because I'm not, you know, no. So I will share that, because I'm all about not wanting anyone to have to go through what we went through, losing their child. So anyway, I want to thank you for watching. Please subscribe. And also, like I said, if you have any questions about anything, feel free to DM me. Other than that, take care, and I look forward to seeing you here.